Hello, I'm Dr. Julie Ann McFan, the creator of Grandma's Sewing Cabinet blog and podcast, and this is lesson 3 in our skirt pattern drafting sew along. And today is the biggie. We are going to actually draft the pattern. I'll go through it step by step. You'll just kind of see how I do it, but I want you to follow along in the handout that I made. Go to grandmasewingcabinet.com and click on the link, and you will find the handout that has lots and lots of illustrations and step-by-step directions. Okay, so let's get started. The thing you need to do is using the measurements we took in our last lesson. You're going to put the measurements in the places where it's identified. So do that first. I've already done that using my sister's measurements. So I'm going to make the skirt pattern for her. So the first thing we do is we cut a piece of dot paper or grid paper. This one is about 29 by 36 inches. She's a small girl, so I don't need quite 36 by 36. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a line. Now I'm using marker so that you guys can see it, but you use a pencil. Okay, so fold your paper in half. I forgot to put that on the handout, but just so you can see it easier, just throw your fold your paper in half so you can get an idea of where the middle is. And this works out well because it's almost right on line. And you're going to make a line, not from the very top, but you're going to make a line right along one of those lines, the same length that you want your skirt to be, and make it nice and straight. So my ruler is 18 inches long, and I'm going to make a skirt for my sister that when it's done, it's going to be about 20 inches long. So I will make a line 20 inches long. And of course, I'm doing this on a video, so my line is not nice and straight. Oops. Well, my line is going to be more than 20 inches long. Okay, so my sister's skirt is going to be about 23 inches long. Okay, the top I'm going to put an A, nice and big, and the bottom I'm going to label B, nice and big. All right, this is your side seam. I know it doesn't look like it, but that's what that is. Now I'm going to measure down from that top of my line my center front hip depth, and my sister's is going to be right there. So I'm going to make a line, and then using my lines on my ruler, I'm going to make sure it's perpendicular to my first line, and it just needs to be big enough that I can use it later on, but not too big. And that gets called C. And that's our horizontal balance line. That's our hip line, okay? But you'll hear it called HBL, or horizontal balance line. If you look at commercial patterns, that's that line. They usually have a circle with a cross in the middle. That tells you that that's where the hip is. Okay, now we're going to start making the back part of our pattern. So we're going to draw a line from A to the left that's equal to our back hip arc. Not our waist arc, our hip arc, because we've got to get that waist over our hips, okay? So this is hip arc, plus we need a skosh more room, so we add a 1/2 inch ease. So our back hip arc plus 1/2 inch ease is, on my sister, 11 5/8 and 4 5 use your line to make sure, your lines on your ruler, to make sure that that line is perpendicular to your first line. We want everything straight. And that's actually called squaring it off. Okay, so that line we just made is D. Now comes the easy part. We're going to make 2 more lines just like that. The next line is exact same length and everything. We're going to make our next one at C. And again, make sure it's nice and squared off. My rotary mat has a lot of gouges in it. So this line we call E. And then we do our last one at the bottom. And again, make sure it's nice and straight. And that we call E. So far, so good. We've made 4 or 5 lines. Next step is we just connect the outside. And in the instructions, how I did it was each step is, each particular step is done in a red line so that you can just look at it and say, oh, that's the one that we're supposed to do. Okay, so as you see, we just line everything up. Now we have 2 rectangles, 1 giant rectangle with a line in it. This is the basic outline for our back of our skirt, okay? So let's make a little lines. This is our horizontal balance line or our hip line. Let's mark this with back so that we know that that's the back of our skirt. I'm going to change pens because that one seems to be running out of ink. Now we do basically the same process for the front of our skirt. Okay, as I flip my pages. Oh, excuse me. There's one important step. We have to make G, where we measure up from E. We start at E, and we measure up. Oh my. Did I goof? Well, according to this, I measure up to here and call that G. But somehow I don't think that that's right. Let me double check with my center back depth. Well, maybe because of her backside curves from being a dancer, it's up a little higher. Let's use a different measurement. Because for a lot of people, it will normally be like somewhere around there. So we'll just see, this is why we take measurements. We'll see what happens. Okay, but we call that G. All right, now we're going to go and look at the front. So we draw a line from A out to the right that's equal to your front hip arc plus a 1/2 inch of ease. So for my sister, now I'm going to move it over a little bit so I can make sure it's nice and straight. Okay, and that gets called H. You're going to know your numbers and the alphabets and your fractions by the time you're done with this. And then we're going to do the same thing, just like we did. We're going to make 2 more lines. So your front hip arc, not your back, your front, we're working on the front. Front hip arc plus your ease, your 1/2 inch ease. and again at the bottom, your front hip arc plus a 1/2 inch of ease. And again, try to make sure that everything is nice and square and straight. And then we're going to connect the outside edges of those lines. Nice and straight. Remember, I'm using markers so that you guys can see. And this is front. So make sure you mark it so you don't get confused. And this is our hip line or horizontal balance line. Okay? So far so good. All we've had to do was make a bunch of lines. Now things get a little interesting. We're going to start working on your dart. How to make your darts, because when we did the top, this was equal to what your hip was. Well, we want things to curve around and so forth, so we need to make darts, and darts will gather it in. In the handout there is a table that shows, can you see that? There's a table that tells you how much your dart intake should be, and based on the difference between your waist and your hip. For what I learned in design school, because we were using size 8 all the time, we made darts that were 5/8 of an inch in the front and 1 inch in the back. The dart intake is that flappy thing. Hold on, I'll be right back. This is a very wrinkled muslin that I was making. Can you see that? But this part right here, is called the dart intake, and that line right there, the sewn part is the dart legs. Okay, so we have to figure out, based on the difference between our waist and our hip, how much we need to gather that up and then have it disappear to nothing. Okay? All right. I'm going to use 5/8. I know for my sister it works because of she is wearing a good chunk of the clothes I made in design school. And this is where we do some math. So we're going to take our back waist arc. I'm going to put there it is, my ruler. We do our back waist dart plus our dart intake plus our back dart intake plus 1/4 inch ease, and that will determine where we make our next line. Okay, so back waist arc for my sister is 7 inches plus 2 darts in the back, so 1 inch plus 1 inch, and then 1/4 inch ease, and comes out to 9 1/4. Okay, so I make a line right here, big enough to see, but not too big, and we call that K. Now, figuring out where to put the darts. Well, remember when we were doing the measuring and our back dart placement, and I said line it up with your shoulder blade and take that measurement? And it should be around 3 inches for most people. And that's what it is for my sister. So I make a dot where my first dart goes for my first dart leg. Well, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and do the darts.